Thank you all for being here.
You don't want to use this?
We are good. Where was the microphone? Where's the mic? Oh, okay, that's fine.
Why don't you use this?
I'm loud enough, sir. Right? No?
No.
I can't hear you, guys. Thank you for being here. Hemant Dai. Hello. You can't even hear me on the mic. He's the retreat chair. Thank you. She has won gold, silver, and bronze medals in the athletics at 3 Paralympic Games. She was the first torch bearer to enter the Olympic Stadium for the opening ceremony of the Sydney 2000 Paralympic Games, and in 2006 she was selected to present on behalf of the International Paralympic Committee to the United Nations in New York. Off the track, Katrina is the director of her own business, Silver to Gold, which she will be talking today. That's High Performance Solutions. As a qualified physiotherapist and a person that knows how to achieve gold medals results more than once, her business specializes in turning silver to gold and improving the performance and health of organizations, teams, and individuals. To add to this, she's a member of the Premier's Council for Women in South Australia and has walked in the Kokoda track and is a mother of 3 boys. In 2012, Katrina was selected as one of the 3 International Paralympic Committee ambassadors at the London Paralympic Games. Katrina Webb is a unique and inspiring speaker whose ideas and experiences challenge and motivate her audiences. She has delivered over 500 presentations to over 150,000 people in 5 different countries. Please welcome Katrina Webb.
All right, if we need the microphone, that's fine. Now I've just said a few words. Can I say that's 6 countries? This is really super exciting for me to be here. This is my first visit to Nepal ever. So thank you very much for hosting me. And I must say this will have to go down as the most scenic place I've ever done a presentation. So if I kind of wander off into the mountains, I apologise. But what an amazing location, and thank you so much. So we're going to have a bit of fun the next 2 hours and then eat some food. So I'm going to share my story with you and give you some activities, some fun activities to do to make it interactive, and so you hopefully enjoy it. But also from my introduction, you would have heard that I've got 3 sons, and I often look at and I listen to that introduction and think, oh, I wonder what the most challenging thing has been along that journey for me. You know, you think I'm a Paralympic athlete, which I'll talk to you about, and I'll tell you about some of the other things I've done, but I still think that having 3 boys is my biggest challenge in life. Yeah, I know, 3 boys. So my oldest will be 7 2 days after Christmas. My middle one's 4.5. And my little one's only 15 months, so So I'm very comfortable actually being here today. There's Marina, who's been a fabulous host. Thank you for Marina for bringing me down. But this is what I'm used to: a husband and 3 boys, and even a male dog. So let me start by telling you a little bit about my journey. Now, some of these photos you might not be able to see super well, so I might just have to fill. And afterwards, if you want to see them in more detail, we can show them on both my computer. But this photo here helps if you can see it a bit clearer. But this was at the United Nations in New York in the year 2006. So this guy actually has a blue suit here, and it's Kofi Annan, who was the Secretary General of the UN at the particular time. Some people say, I see you've met Nelson Mandela, Katrina, or some people think it's Morgan Freeman. They don't know their UN knowledge too well. But this was the year of, this was the closing ceremony of the Year of Sport for the United Nations. So in the year of 2005, they were using sport as a vehicle to promote peace, development, health and education around the world. And countries all over the world had then said, okay, what can we do as a country to use sport as this vehicle to try and help with these 4 areas? At the start of 2006, they had a closing ceremony for that year, and all the sports ministers and a lot of prime ministers came in to hand their information to Kofi Annan to say what they'd done. And at the same time, they invited 4 athletes from around the world to speak. And a job of speaking was to share how sport had been critical in our careers and the benefit of sport. So you probably can't pick out, normally if you could see it well, I'm not sure if you can see it on that one very well. But the athlete to the left of me just here is someone that you probably would know really well. Can anyone see him? Or no? He's a tennis player.
Roger Federer.
Roger Federer, yes, yeah. And I always make a bit of a joke on this because if you look closely, maybe later, he's actually looking sort of my way, and I kind of joke about it. If you look a bit closer, you can see he's trying to check me out. Yeah. You'll just have to look at that photo a bit later because it's a good one. I don't think he was, but there's not many people around there that've got a photo that looks like Roger Federer is just looking to his left. So Roger Federer spoke. The other athlete is this guy next to him, who is from Chile, and his name was Elias Figueroa. He's Chile's best ever football player, soccer player. And the other athlete is the only other female in the photo, who's in the red dress, second from the left, in the front row, and her name's Tegla Larupe, and she's from Kenya, and a very well-known athlete. And when you sort of go to these sort of functions, similar to coming to these functions and you chat to each other, and I know you're probably getting to know each other better the more seminars like this that you have, but when we head to these sort of things, we network and we chat. And when I first met Tegla, I just said, oh, how did you get involved in sport? And I really wasn't expecting her answer when she said, I'm one of 24 siblings. She grew up in a village in Kenya. And at the age of 5, if she wanted to go to school to get an education, she had to run 10 kilometres in the morning and 10 kilometres home, which is, I think, very typical of a lot of kids that live in rural and remote Africa. So 20 kilometres a day she had to run, which, think about how you had to get to school. I don't know many of your backgrounds, but I'm sure it was probably a bit easier than that. I know when I grew up, I lived about 500 metres from my school and I was always late. So my mum would often get in her dressing gown and jump in the car and drive me to school because, the closer you are, the later you are. So, but Tegla's extraordinary. She ended up becoming a marathon runner and has been to 3 Olympics and still holds world record for half marathon. But the amazing thing about Tegla is she's opened up her own peace schools in Kenya, and she builds her own schools to try and help orphans using sport to get a chance at life. And often I use this photo just not only to share this pretty incredible experience that I had as an athlete, but I share it because often I look at it and I think, how on earth did I get in that photo? To be alongside of someone like Roger Federer, who's globally well known, Tegla's building fabulous peace schools. Elias Figueroa was a replacement for Pelé, so you'd all know Pelé, he just couldn't make it. And then there's me, representing the International Paralympic Committee. But what I realised from this situation is it's something that you can't actually set a goal for, it's something you can't apply for, it's something that you don't even really know exists. But what I realised from it is with everything that I've done as an athlete and a person, and no matter what's come my way in life, I've always set a pathway of trying to be the absolute best I can be, no matter what comes my way. But at the same time, I've always kept others in the forefront of my mind. And those two simple things about how am I performing at my absolute best and am I looking after others at the same time have been, I think, the two simple philosophies that I've just have driven myself. And then I sort of reflect on that and say, well, okay, and I'll tell you more about the story behind how I got there, but if I didn't even know that photo existed, but it happened, and it was something I didn't apply for or set a goal to achieve, what other things can happen in my life that I don't even know exist? And I know I'm talking to a group of entrepreneurs here, and you've done incredible things. I've heard a couple of the stories on our walk up, and I look forward to hearing more as maybe we have lunch together. But you've had some amazing opportunities in life already and done some incredible things. But what could be there that you still don't even know exists? What could a photo be in, say, the next 6 months or 12 months that you still don't know that exists? That if you actually could improve your own performance and keep others in mind at the same time, that you could achieve some even bigger things. How could you turn your performance from silver to gold and get the best out of yourself? So what I'm going to do is, I know that keeps jumping in. Is it okay? Yeah? You hearing me okay? Is going to tell you about my background and along the way just give you some tips that I've found that have been critical for me to continue to be the best I can be. And I use these things on a daily basis. So it's not just as me trying to win gold as an athlete. These are things that are real, that I've spoken now for 20 years around the place and get to do a lot of research, I suppose, and they're real for everybody. And it's a good chance while you've got this retreat to take some time out to actually then just reflect as I'm speaking to say, well, you know what, I'm pretty crap at that. actually, I don't do that well. You know, I've done that really well, but those strengths that I do in terms of my business, I've actually left a trail of dead bodies behind me in other areas of my life. Or, you know what, I could sharpen up on some of those areas that if I could perform better, then maybe I can then be better in what I do. So about my background, so you've heard I'm a Paralympic athlete, and I'm not sure, did anyone Google or have a look at my background before I came?
Yes.
Yeah. So do you know what's wrong with me?
Cerebral palsy.
Well done. Did anyone else know that?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Oh, good, you've done some homework. But you've still probably been checking me out, am I right? Trying to work out exactly how it affects me? Yeah, hands up who sort of wasn't sure how I'd walk in and, yeah, be honest, be honest. It's cool, because I do the same thing. Okay, because so you know I've got cerebral palsy, but a lot of the time I go to functions and people have no idea what's wrong with me, and they know there's this Paralympian coming, and so certainly as I walk in, I challenge their views on what a Paralympian would be. Now, a challenge for you all, do you know Nepal has only ever had, as I could do my research, their first Paralympic athlete in Athens won, the second one in Beijing won. There's never been a winter Paralympian. Yeah? That is pretty incredible, but incredible opportunity for Nepal if they could get some stuff together and some stuff right. How could potentially lives of people with disability be changed? So your image of a Paralympian may be something different depending on what you've seen on TV, but often when I walk in, I'm not people's image of a Paralympic athlete. And as you've said, I've got cerebral palsy, but the interesting thing about my cerebral palsy is I actually didn't know I had cerebral palsy until I was 18 years old. And when I found out what I had with cerebral palsy, my parents started to receive all these phone calls from their friends, and their friends were saying, oh, I'm so sorry to hear about Katrina, because at the time they'd read in the paper that star netballer. Now, if I say netball, do you know what it is?
Yes.
Yes? Do most of you know the sport netball? If you've lived in Australia, do others have no idea, or do you know what it is? Netball? Okay, so it's played mainly in Commonwealth countries, and in Australia it's the most popular sport for girls. It's only played by women, and it's a bit of a mixture of, it's a bit like basketball, but you can't bounce the ball and you can't run with the ball, bit modified. But at this particular time, my parents' friends had read in the paper that star netballer had cerebral palsy. And I think they rang my parents because they rang feeling sorry because they didn't really know what it was. I'm not sure what their image of cerebral palsy was. I'm not sure, even if you Googled my background and saw that I had cerebral palsy, I don't know what image you'd have. Do you see many kids or people with cerebral palsy around Nepal? No or yes?
Not that many.
Not many, yeah. So typically for most countries, an image of cerebral palsy, even with pretty good technology, if someone's got really severe cerebral palsy, could be a young child in a wheelchair that obviously can't walk because they've got a lot of spasticity and tone in their muscles. It can be that severe that they might not be able to talk because they've got a lot of tone and spasticity in their facial muscles and even do any sort of activities of daily living themselves. But then you've got really mild cases like myself. And I think the most interesting thing, I'm not sure of the stats here, but in Australia, which has got advanced medical technology and we have great, hospital systems, every 14 hours a baby is born with cerebral palsy. So it is a very common disability globally. So anyway, my story goes that I was born in 1977. Save you having to think it all this weekend, I'm 37 years of age. And I spoke to my parents about their pregnancy and they said that everything was fine. My mum had me at the right time, I was a good weight, I was a good length, and did everything because babies do. Have most of you got kids, just out of interest? Quite a few of you, yeah. Most of you, yeah. And so for me as a youngster, everything was going pretty good. When I turned about this age, or you can just see a little blonde blob on the picture. This was about me being aged 2. My grandmother actually noticed that I was limping, so I tend to limp on my right side a little bit if I get tired. It was the first thing they picked up. I went off to the local doctor and he had a look and he said, look, can't pick up anything just now, but can you keep an eye on it for me, and if it doesn't get better then come back and we'll send you off to a specialist. And that's exactly what happened. I went off and saw a paediatric specialist a year later, and this specialist kind of got out a bit of a checklist, and this is how my parents report it happening, sort of said, oh yeah, she's Katrina, tick, she was a good birth weight, tick, she was a good length, tick, yeah, she's got her 10 fingers and 10 toes, tick. And somewhere during your pregnancy, he was saying this to my mum, she'd suffered some very, very mild brain damage. And on the left side of her brain, that's why she's limping on the right side of her body. Tick, good, any questions, thanks for coming in. He kind of just added it on as if it wasn't anything major, it was something mild, and even back in the early 80s in Australia, disability wasn't spoken about a lot. Now, I'm sure it's probably similar if you've only got 2 Paralympic athletes. I'm sure disability is something that's not accepted really well here, and it is an opportunity for people to make a big difference if we could get things organised. But Australia still, you know, back only 25 years ago, we didn't have schools for kids with disabilities. If it was quite severe, you didn't go to school. So this is only new stuff that has been happened even in our country. But he then said to my parents, I've actually got a bit of a scan here, you might be able to see this. Back in 1980 they couldn't do a brain scan, but I friends with a neurologist, and this year she said to me, would you like to have a scan of your brain? I said, love to. I'd love to see what it looks like, and firstly to see whether I've got one, which I do, I can tell you that. So you might see a tiny little bit of white scar tissue there, so that's if you actually cut the top or took a photo looking down into my head on the left side of my brain, tiny little bit of white scar tissue. This one's probably better with this view, is if you're looking in, if the camera could take a picture in slicing my brain that way, you can just see some white scar tissue there on the left side of my brain. So that's basically where the damage was before I was even born. So the doctor said to my parents, basically from that point in time, I'd have to wear one of these little plasters to bed. This is a photo of me when I was probably 3 or 4, and you can see I've got a plaster on my right leg, strapped in. And the doctor basically said to my parents at that point in time, I'd have to wear a plaster on my right side until I stopped growing, just to make sure my calf didn't tighten up because my foot relaxed too much while I was sleeping. And it was quite some time because I'm just under 6 foot. So when I worked out, it was about 3,000 nights, 72,000 hours, 4,320,000 minutes, and I could probably tell you the seconds. But you can see I wasn't counting. But besides having to do that, there wasn't much else that this doctor said I had to do. I'd just go to the physio a couple of times a year to make sure I'd get a new plaster made, and I'd visit this specialist once a year, and he always couldn't believe how good I was doing. I went to mainstream school and always was good academically, never had problems academically, and I was always coordinated at sport. This is a bit of my sporting genes. My father is this man here, playing a sport in Australia called Aussie Rules football. I don't know if you've ever visited. If you visited, you couldn't miss it. Australia think it's the best game in the world, or some Australians do anyway. And he was a very good, successful footballer. And this lady here, you can faintly see in the green and gold holding a basketball, is my first cousin. That's my mum's brother's daughter. And so she went to 3 Olympic Games for basketball. So for me, born into quite a sporting family is quite helpful. We pass some genetics down. And when I was at school, I think in Australia, and I reckon this is a pretty big thing in Australia because we love sport, but thinking back on my school days, if you were good academically, you could fit in, yeah? And if you're coordinated in some sense, because Australians love sport so much, you could fit in. So school could be a pretty okay place for you if you could tick those 2 boxes. You might remember back to your days at school, you know, if you're a little bit different, school could be a hard place. If you were tall or short or different colour skin or blonde hair, red hair, freckles, no freckles, pimples, you know, you can just think back to how hard school can be. Shall we swap? And so for me going to school, it's a bit better for me, thank you, I could fit in, and I'll just say that, fit in, even though I had this mild weakness on my right side. But it wasn't until I got to my early sort of teen years where I actually started to realise how this actually affected me, and that was probably those years where you start to compare yourself to your peers. The first thing I realised, and I can significantly remember that moment, is that I can actually just move my right toes, but I can't curl them over. Yet I can do it really easily on my left side, and you're probably sitting there doing it right now, some of you, yeah? If you can do it, it's such an easy skill, right? You know, I can do it on my left side, but I cannot, no matter how hard I can try, do it on my right. And I remember the moment going into my parents and actually saying, oh, Mum and Dad, you know, why can't I curl my toes over? And they actually didn't know. They said, oh, come on, just work a bit harder, you can do it. And I'd try and I couldn't. They'd go, come on, just a bit harder, and I'd try and I couldn't do it. And it was the first moment when they realised that I actually couldn't do that movement. You know, for most of you that you said you've got kids, have you ever checked whether your kids can curl their toes? Probably not. Except when my first boy came out, yes, Second one, yes. Yeah, third one, yes. I can tell you they all can curl their toes, lucky them. But it's something, though, for me, growing up, that really bothered me. It was that first moment of realising, I knew I had to wear that plaster at night. But that was something that was just sort of something that I had to put on, material, I suppose, that I could put on. But it was the first moment where I actually realised, oh, wow, I can't do something. And I got really caught up in the fact that I couldn't curl my toes over. We actually think about it. Can you think of an activity right now where you just need toe curling for? Probably not. I can get you all thinking it's something that you really don't need as a skill to do. Unless you wear thongs. Some of you got thongs. Next time you try and wear your thongs, try not to curl your toes and see if you can keep them on. It's difficult. Or when you get your high heels out, I'm sure many of you don't, but you never know on a Saturday night. I can't wear high heels because my balance is pretty ordinary. So I'll give you a demonstration. If I stand on my left side, my balance is good, and it should be good because I can do everything normally. If I try and stand on my right side now, and you can see I can't look around, I'm having to concentrate, I'm having to rely on other means of keeping myself stable. It's really quite difficult for me to balance. But I'm okay, I've learnt to balance. But to do what's called a calf raise, so I can do it with my left side. But to even think about doing it on this side is it's hard work. And so for me, you'll see me walking around, but I have to kind of demonstrate that to you for you to actually realise how it actually affects me, because you probably won't pick that up, with me just walking around. But the thing that bothered me the absolute most growing up, when I started to realise that I couldn't do these things very well, was because the muscles don't work as well. It's because that damage that you saw on my brain scan stops the messages getting to my right side as well, that my muscles are never going to be as strong as my other side, hence they'll be a little bit smaller. And growing up, I absolutely hated that. That was the thing that bothered me the most, because that's something that I couldn't hide. You'll notice it if I've pointed it out, but I would try and hide that growing up, that people wouldn't realise that there was a difference, because that's something that they could spot. And I absolutely hated it. So I could hide other things. If I was limping, someone would come up to me and say, have you hurt yourself? And I'd say, oh yeah, my knee's a bit sore today. Or, oh, Katrina, you're limping, what happened? Oh, my ankle's a bit sore. Oh, Katrina, what happened? Oh, you're limping. Oh, I stubbed my toe. If I had to do stretches at school, you might remember doing some of the old quad stretches. So they'd say, can you stand up and stretch your quads? So I'd stand there and they'd say, okay, change legs. And I'd just kind of look around and just stretch the same leg again. I just learnt ways to show that I didn't have a weakness. Why? Because I can remember back from a very early age that I had thoughts. I had thoughts that would tell me things like, what if people find out that you're different and that you're broken and that you don't work as well, then they might not like you. That's how our brains, that were the thoughts that I had from a very early age. So I had this fear of letting people know that I had a difference, because I just wanted to fit in, I wanted to be accepted. So I did everything I could from a young age to make sure people wouldn't find out there was something wrong. So not only would I hide, as I said, but I would just work hard physically to keep up with everybody else. So I was a good young netballer, as I talked about before, and instead of going out once a week, like everybody else, to do training, I would go out 2 or 3 times a week. Why? Just to actually be able to keep up with my peers, and then, they wouldn't realise that I had a difference. But then I started to realise that by doing an extra 1 or 2 sessions, I could in fact be better than them. And if you think of your work ethic and what's got you to probably where you are today, has been purely by hard work. Yeah. I'm just so grateful I learnt to do that, because to get somewhere and to be successful doesn't come easy. So from a very young age I learnt how to work hard, and by working hard I made it to a place in Australia called the Australian Institute of Sport, which is in Canberra, which is our capital, and it's a big sporting centre of excellence. So all the best athletes from a junior age and a senior age actually go and live in Canberra full time. They fund you, everything's funded, you go live there for a whole year and you do your sport as your skill. So in 1995 I was accepted. I went and lived with 12 other girls from around Australia, which is a pretty amazing thing. There's probably about 20,000 girls at a particular age group playing, so to get to that point where you're one of 12 girls from around Australia is pretty exciting. But this was the year that completely changed my life. This is the year that firstly I developed a really good injury. I had a knee injury on my right side, which makes sense. The sport of netball, if you just think of basketball and think how much energy is placed on your knees. Then at a sport called netball where you actually can't run with the ball, as soon as you land, you've got to stop and you can only step with one foot. So you actually get a lot of impact in your knees and your joints. I have pathetic shock absorption because of my right side. So after a lot of court time, I developed a really good knee injury, which did dampen my netball career, which was pretty devastating as a 17, 18-year-old, going there to aspire to maybe play, this sport for your country, and find out that was going to be my first hurdle. The second thing that happened was I then started to realise that I was not getting picked for the team. We were playing in the best league in Australia, which is probably one of the best leagues in the world. And netball is a very subjective sport. If the coach likes you, she'll pick you, a bit like soccer or football. Whereas if you do athletics, if you run a particular time, you're in the team. And I started not getting picked for the team, which was again heartbreaking at that age, because this is kind of where my dream was heading. But to top all that off, I found out that this weakness that I had on my right side was actually a mild case of cerebral palsy. It was my physio that picked it up. So I was getting a lot of physiotherapy to get over this knee injury. And one particular day, this physio student was there learning, and out comes this checklist again. And this physio goes, "Oh, this is Katrina Webb, tick. She's a netballer, tick. I was a goal defender, goalkeeper, tick." She said, and she's got this injury called patellar tendonitis, and went on to talk about my injury, tick. And then she said something I'd never heard come after my name before. She actually said to this student, and she's actually really unique, she's actually got a mild case of cerebral palsy, tick. And I remember lying back on the bed thinking, hang on a second, what the hell is she talking about? I kind of remember putting my hand up and going, I think you've got that wrong checklist. That last one, that's not me. She said, yeah, didn't you know that's what you've actually got? It's called cerebral palsy. And I said, no, I had no idea. I told her what I've told you, that I've known that I've had something. My parents were told I had something, but they never knew that it was labelled cerebral palsy. So it didn't change too much for me, because I was still exactly the same person. But very quickly the word got around the Institute of Sport that there was a girl that was supposed to be non-disabled, or able-bodied, however you want to call it, non-disabled, like you all if you don't have disability. And the word got around that I was there as a non-disabled athlete who had a mild disability. So as you can imagine, the coach of athletes with a disability at the time got pretty excited. Yeah? He was thinking, wow, how's this girl got this far in sport for people without a disability? Imagine if we get her across to the Paralympics. She could be awesome. She could be absolutely fantastic. Now, this coach was a very enthusiastic, energetic man, and he'd come from a very high-level sporting background in himself. He was married to an Olympic gold medalist in the field of athletics, and if you know him, he just can't sit still. He's just, kind of a ball of energy the whole time. And once he found this news out, you can imagine he was pretty excited. And one day I was walking along to training with a couple of other girls, and I'm sure we were planning what we were going to do on that Saturday night. We were 18-year-old females living with 250 athletes, males included. We were probably planning what our Saturday night plan was. In fact, on the side of what I'm talking about, I ended up marrying an athlete that was there, a water polo athlete, who played for Australia. So there's quite a few relationships in Australia that have come from athletes that have been living in the same place for that period of time. So this coach at the time, I was walking along to training, and he kind of, it was like he just jumped out of the bushes or something. He just sort of jumped out in front of me, and he had his hands rubbing together, and he kind of goes, "Oh, Katrina," he was so excited. He goes, "I've just found out you've got cerebral palsy." He was so excited and pumped up. It was like I'd won the lottery or something. I could just see him standing there and rubbing his hands together, and I'm sort of just coming back a bit, going, "Oh, don't say that too loud. I don't really like that term," and hadn't really told many people, and didn't really feel very comfortable. And he said, "You know what, in a year's time, if you get classified, which means they do a certain amount of physical tests on me to first work out whether I'm eligible for the Paralympics. So there's a minimal criteria that you have to tick to first be eligible. And then they classify you so you race against people the same as you. So Paralympic sport is just like any other sport. It's based on a level playing field. Do you guys do any sport out of interest? What sport? Squash, yeah. Do you mainly compete against males or females? Males. Okay, so there's a classification based on gender. Any other sports? Anyone do anything else? No? Too busy working, hey? I'll ask this question again later on. But you might think of, what's the classification based in boxing? Weight, yeah, to be fairness, yeah. Classification in School sport. Age, yeah, exactly. So Paralympic sport exactly the same. You go through a level of classification, so you race against people the same as you. And secondly, he said to me, if you could qualify, of course you can't just rock up at a Paralympic Games, just like Olympic Games. You need to be good at something, you need to qualify and get in. And so he said to me, in a year's time, if you do those two things, you could go to the Atlanta Paralympic Games. Now, just let me remind you, I was 18 years of age at this particular time on an able-bodied netball scholarship, and hiding my disability because I hated it. Didn't want people to know that I was different, and then find out that I was potentially eligible for the Paralympic Games. Do you think I was excited? No. Why not? Hey?
Because you wanted to be mainstream.
I want to be mainstream. I want to be able-bodied. Yeah. Any other reason why?
Scholarship.
Finished my netball scholarship up. Yeah. Yeah. But that's probably the main thing, was that I wanted to be mainstream. I was doing able-bodied sport. But I'd hidden this thing that I hated about myself for such a long period of time that if I became a Paralympian, guess what? The whole world would know. And not just in Adelaide. If you become a Paralympian, it's a global thing. It's the second biggest event in the world behind the Olympic Games. It's a massive event. And when I first heard him say that, I just thought, oh God, Paralympics, that means people are going to know that I've got a disability, and I hate that. And again, my thoughts go into place. Yeah? Thoughts of, if people find out they've got something wrong, they're not going to like me. Yeah. It's a protective mode of our mindset. Luckily enough for me, though, I was able, even as an 18-year-old, to somehow let those thoughts just sit. I spent some time with the sports psychologist while I was there, because this for me was a life-changing decision. I could have just said no and just sort of gone back to my hometown and been an average netballer, probably never got picked for the best team, probably might have had to stop because of my knee injury, and just kind of been mediocre. Yeah, I could have just had a pretty average life. If I'd chosen to believe my thoughts that were scared about what people would think. But a part of me saw this coach who loved this Paralympic sport. You could just feel the fire and energy and passion that he had inside. He didn't have a disability. He has 4 children, none of them have a disability. He just loved it because it was sport. And he saw this as an incredible life-changing opportunity for me. I wanted to know why. I wanted to know why he thought it was that fantastic. So when I actually sat down with a sports psychologist, just like you do in business, you know, you sit down and do a SWOT analysis of something that comes your way. Are we going to tender for that? Are we going to put a bid in? Whatever it is that you do. It was like that for me. I sat down and thought, well, what are the opportunities in this situation? What are the obstacles? Yeah, and the biggest obstacle for me was dealing with my own head, dealing with my own thoughts. What will people think of me if I do this? I just let them sit for a bit, and when I actually looked at the opportunities, what do you reckon they were? Out of interest. What would be the opportunities or the positives if I chose to become a Paralympic athlete?
Your chances are better. You could be famous.
I could be famous. I could come to Nepal and do a talk in a retreat to EO, and some 20 years later, yeah, I didn't know that would happen, but I could become relatively famous, yeah. Yeah.
Compete on the same level.
I could compete, yeah, instead of having to compete against people that are physically 100% able, I could have a level playing field.
Could you be better than being normal?
I could be better than being normal, yeah. Who gets that? I reckon that's probably most of you guys. Because you've made a decision somewhere along your life, or whether, I know a couple of you I've spoken to, you had some family business that you've chosen to join and progress. But there was a point where you decided that you wanted to be better than just average. You wanted to learn to turn silver to gold and push your boundaries and take things to where you could, which is extraordinary. There's a lot of people that don't make that life decision because they're too scared. Yeah. It's better than normal. What else could I do? If I go to the Paralympic Games.
You could travel the world.
I could travel the world, yeah. Well done. Yeah, I could, and I still do. I've travelled every year since making the decision, bar one, I think. And now, having competed for 8 years, I'm still travelling, which is amazing, all because of sport. I could actually represent my country. You know, I don't know, who would like to do that, or would have had a dream of... yeah, I mean, you probably are still in what you're doing. Who would love to be the best in the world at something? Anyone ever got that desire? I'm sure you must have. With this, yeah, it's cool. Every day. Imagine if you could, become the best company in the world at what you do. I'm sure you're going to that goal. Exactly the same for me. But the biggest thing that actually motivated me and drove me from inside was actually asking myself a question at age 18. Why am I so embarrassed about this thing that I don't like about myself? And that's a pretty big question to ask yourself as an 18-year-old, because you're still trying to work out who the hell you are. And I just felt like I was hiding. I felt like I had to waste all this energy being someone that I truly wasn't. I couldn't truly be myself. And I thought, if I become a Paralympian, I'm just going to have this label on me that I'm going to actually have to deal with all of this stuff. And you know what? If the best outcome of all of this is actually learning to love who I am, and then one day hopefully being a role model for some young kids who have exactly the same CP as me and help change their life, you know what? That's what's probably my biggest motivation. Because with cerebral palsy, there's really severe that get quite good rehab. They have a harder life. There's but they sort of fit in a sense, and same with moderate. But if you've got a mild disability like myself, or some other mild disability, sometimes it's just harder because you sort of fit in but you don't. And I just thought, well, if I could be a role model for one young kid that has exactly the same thing for me, that would make it all worthwhile. So I decided to have a crack. I actually finished my netball scholarship off. I moved back to my home city of Adelaide, which I still live in, which is in South Australia. Has anyone, I know a few of you travelled to Australia. How many of us travelled to Australia? Has anyone been to Adelaide? Probably not. You've probably gone to Sydney, Melbourne, Gold Coast, right? Yeah. Come to the south. Now you know me. If you ever come to Australia, make sure you track me down. And we have the best wine in the whole of Australia, I think, the Barossa Valley. You may have heard of, if you're wine drinkers, you should have heard of the Barossa Valley wine, McLaren Vale, Clare Valley. So I decided to move back home and finish netball and have a crack at this Paralympic movement. Now, before I go on, I'm just going to explain exactly what cerebral palsy is, and I'll get you to do something just to get you moving. And please feel free, if you've got to stand or move or grab a drink, do whatever you need to do. But cerebral palsy is something that occurs in utero. It occurs, it's not genetic, it's not hereditary. Anyone can have a baby with cerebral palsy. I just think it's the miracle of birth. Something goes wrong. Or for something to go wrong during a pregnancy, where there's a lack of oxygen to the brain, that's pretty much what cerebral palsy is. 80% of the cases they don't know why, but the 20% of the cases that they do know why often occur with babies that are born before 30 weeks because something went wrong and the baby came out early. For me, I could have just done a somersault inside and my umbilical cord could have wrapped around my neck for a short period of time. I'll never know what it was, but that's just an example of what could have happened to cut off oxygen to my brain. My mum was never sick, she wasn't ill, she didn't have an accident or anything, it was just the miracle of birth. So it's the messages that don't get from my brain in that area that you saw on the picture to my muscles as well. It'll never get any better, I can't fix it. That's
Not even surgically?
Not even surgically? Removes part of my brain? No.
Maybe there's a clot or something.
No, it's... however, the development of the brain now people know that the brain is more neuroplastic than they ever thought. I think there's hope for a lot of kids now with cerebral palsy because the rehab can be so much better. You can never get rid of it. Once damage is there, it's there. But I'll never know what it's like to have two strong sides. I just know that I've got one side that's really automatic and the other side I have to think a lot more about. Even when I'm walking, to just put my heel placement down, it just happens automatically with my left side, but my right side, particularly when I'm tired, it's just hard work for my brain. I can just feel that difference. It's like I've got two different sides. I'm going to give you a demo and pop this down for a sec. Just pop your hands out in front of you, and this will just get your brains working a little bit. Just turn your palms up to the ceiling or to the sky, and down again, and just start to speed it up. Okay, to a point where you go as fast as you can. And it's just a good one to do when you've been sitting for a bit and you need to get the blood flowing to your brains again. Just check out your coordination. Okay, this is about enough time. Can you see my right side's looking a little bit slower? A little bit uncoordinated? Yeah. I'm going to stop. Keep going. I haven't told you to stop. I always like to see if there's any recruits somewhere in this space. Or I hear maybe a few too many glasses of red wine last night. Yeah? Or was it white wine? Or beer? Vodka! Okay, you can stop there. But that'll be a nice one just to get some blood flowing to your brains. So you can see that my right side gets tired quicker, it's not as strong, it just takes longer to learn things. So anyway, my story goes that I went to my first games in Atlanta in '96, and I competed in the field of athletics. The coach that discovered me was an athletics coach, and it just made sense to go from a sport of netball, which is a lot of running, to go to athletics to running. There is no netball in the Olympic Games, it's only in the Commonwealth Games anyway. And so I competed in Atlanta in the 100, 200 and long jump, and I came back with 2 gold and a silver medal, which was extraordinary for my first games. When I had no expectation at all. And it was just amazing, my first games, to compete on a level playing field and actually meet people with the same disability. And after my races, go up to my competitors and say, can you not curl your toes over either? And are you really crappy at wearing high heels? And it sucks trying to buy shoes when one foot's a size smaller than the other. And we actually started to compare things that I'd never been able to do before, and felt similar, if you know what I mean, once in my life. My first games, though, was extraordinary in terms of meeting amazing people. When you go to a Paralympic Games, there's around 4,000 athletes who then happen to have a disability. So I could stand here for the rest of the afternoon and tell you story after story after story of how athletes have made their way to the Paralympic Games. I'm just going to share 2 with you. You might not be able to see this really clearly, so let me explain. Can you see what this guy's doing, at least?
Cycling with his leg, is it?
Yeah. What sport's he doing?
That's a bow and arrow.
It's a bow and arrow. Yeah, it's archery. His legs. So his arms, I won't point it out, but he's got a t-shirt on, and so basically where your lovely blue t-shirt's finish, that's where his arms finish, both of them. Okay, so he was born like it. So he's a double arm amputee. His birth parents put him up for adoption because they didn't want him, which is pretty sad. Obviously, they first saw him and thought he didn't have an opportunity or anything that they could help him with in life. But he got adopted into this amazing family, and his name's Matt Stoosman, who lives in the US, so he got adopted out into this great family that had about 6 kids. And when they first brought him home as a baby, as he started to grow up, they thought, oh, what should we do to help him? Should we give him some arms? What should we adapt? And they had this, big discussion of what they were going to do. But they got to the realisation that if they adapted too much, that once he left their front door and went out into life, life isn't adapted for him. So they decided not to do much at all and just let him go with how he could, give him the best opportunity at life. And I think it stemmed from the fact that one day with his siblings, a hole puncher, we probably don't use much anymore, but yeah, that you punch holes in paper and the little tiny bits of paper that come through, he was sitting there in the lounge room picking the pieces of paper up with his toes, and like the other kids were, and I think his parents just went, okay, he can use his feet. So he's learned to do everything with his feet. He's an extraordinary guy. But when he turned 18, in his part of America where he lived, what you do to become a male adult is to go hunting. And he wanted to go hunting with his mates. So he just went and bought a bow and arrow from the local Walmart, I'm sure, or something like that, and spent day after day after day trying to work out how the hell he was going to shoot a bow and arrow so he could just hang out and fit in with his mates. And he learned how to shoot a bow and arrow and went hunting, and then worked out that he's pretty good at it, and which took him to the Paralympic Games in London, and he won a silver medal there for archery. I can't look at that photo and think, you know what, he probably could have picked a sport that might have been a little bit easier. What do you reckon? I don't know, maybe soccer or something like that. But it's extraordinary. The thing I loved about this guy, though, we did a whole bunch of work over there together for BP, and we shared the stage at the games. And afterwards, in finishing our talks, we were just talking about our kids, and he has 3 boys as well. And he said to me, do you know what, only 2 months before the London Games, his oldest son, who would have to be at least 5 or 6 to have 3 boys, only realised that his dad didn't have any arms. And I just thought, how cool is that? This is what I love about the Paralympic movement, is that a young baby that was given up for adoption by his birth parents that didn't think he had a chance of life has gone on to win silver and do extraordinary things as an athlete, to now have 3 young boys that don't even see that his dad's even got a disability, because he's just dad. He goes, I do everything with my boys. I do thumb wrestles. I've just got a great big toe, He said there's nothing that the boys missed out on, which I just found extraordinary. I used to put up photos of Oscar Pistorius, yeah? You probably see why I don't now. I met him, quite a few times along my journey. Who would have thought, hey, that would be his... it's so sad. I still can't believe that, in London 2 years ago when I saw him, and then he's in jail 2 years later. This guy here is another guy I met in London. He's sitting in a chair. So I got to interview 3 male athletes on stage at a ball there, the inaugural Paralympic ball, 1,000 people, and Prince Edward was sitting about there where you guys are. It's pretty easy to interview Paralympic athletes when you get the chance, because you just start by saying, tell us how you got involved in the sport. And I wasn't kind of expecting Derek's story to come out. His name's Derek Deralangi, and he's got this amazing smile on his face. I'm not sure if you can see in that photo. But he's telling me the story that he was a British soldier and he was fighting in Afghanistan, and you probably can fill in the rest of the story, hey? He's a double above-knee amputee. I think he's quite high level. He lost his legs driving over a landmine, and lost his legs at the scene and died. You know, when you hear those stories where people die about 3 times, or he did, and the 3rd time he tells a story where they were zipping his body bag up and they found that he was alive. It was that close. Once he went to the Afghanistan hospital, got stable. Once he was stable, he flew back to London and then rehab from there. And he first woke up in London was his first recollection of we can't even remember anything that happened, but when he woke up, he was in London and his wife was sitting next to him, and his first words were, "What the bloody hell are you doing here? You know, this is Afghanistan, it's dangerous. You can't be here." She goes, "No, honey, you're in hospital, we're in London, you've been in an accident." And even at that point, he still didn't even know he'd lost his legs, because you can still feel it when you lose your legs after having them such a long time. And he tried so many times to go to the toilet. She said, "No, you can't, honey, you can't." And the wife actually had to take a photo of him on her iPhone, of his legs and his stumps, to actually say, "Look, you've been in an accident, you've lost your legs, you can't actually go to the toilet." And that was the sort of first moment that he realised, "Oh, okay, something's happened to me." Why do I share this story? Because he had a smile on his face sharing this story. Why? Because he said, "I never got angry." He said, "I feel like I've been given a gift of life, and I'm so grateful to be here, and I'm going to do everything I can in my power to be the absolute best I can be." He could be really angry, couldn't he? He said, "I had to grieve. Of course I've lost my legs, but I just feel like I've been given this amazing gift." And I learned from, I know I've got my own story, but I learned from that, and I think we have days where life gets really tough, and we get angry at little things, and we blame others, and we get caught up in a whole bunch of stuff. But should we have to go through something like that to really try and then be our absolute best? No, I don't think. But we can get inspired from people like this that go, "Okay, well, I've been given a gift of life, and I'm going to be the best that I can be." And so when he realised that he had the Paralympics in London and he could potentially be in the team, he did everything he could to get there. He came 12th or 13th in discus, and he'll probably never win gold. But his story inspires many just by his attitude, his resilience. At the Paralympic Games, there's not many athletes, if any, that are carrying around the negative baggage of what happened to them in life. To be a Paralympian, you have to have had an accident or be born with a disability. But athletes at that level have accepted it. It's a part of them, and they're actually doing the best with what they've got that works. And that's what makes the absolute difference. Stuff happens. Stuff happens to all of us. Stuff will happen later today. Stuff will happen tomorrow. What's going to happen in your business on Monday? Stuff is guaranteed it's going to happen. Once it's happened, the only thing we've got control over is how we choose to respond to it. And our choice in terms of how we respond to things is, are we responding in our best way possible, or are we actually not doing our best performance? I still whinge and complain when little things happen. You still can get caught up in that rut. But often if you whinge and complain, you give the power away to the circumstances. And you become helpless. And you just don't get anywhere. But when you choose to react in a way when, okay, this has happened, I can't change it, but what can I learn from it? And how can I grow and be the best I can be? That's what makes the absolute difference. So for me, I feel like my gift has been going to 4 games, and learning this is pretty extraordinary. If I could ever immerse you in a village of 4,000 people who have gotten over their disability or gotten over a pretty horrific accident, who are just being their best, absolute best, is a pretty amazing, inspiring place. And I'm really thankful for that, for learning that. And this, in fact, was my own therapy, in a sense. Because you started to go, okay, well, you got over that, and you lived this awesome life, and you lost 2 legs in a bomb, or you were in a car accident, you lost your leg, or you were born like that. One of a good friend of mine, he was born with an arm completely missing, absolutely completely missing, so hasn't even got a humerus at all. But the thing that nearly lost his life for the first 3 years, he spent his first 3 years in life in hospital. He had this condition where he has no stomach wall. So his organs are that close to the surface that as a baby they had to keep him in hospital for 3 years because they thought he would die. Somehow he survived. So they said you can't do any contact sport because if you play soccer or football you could pretty much die. Yep. He has one lung. His spleen is that superficial that you can palpate it. So if he turned on the side, he has this quite strange looking belly because his organs are just sort of sitting there. Over the years as he grew up, because he's got one arm and no stomach muscles, he got scoliosis. Do you all know what scoliosis is? No? So as you grow up, your spine is supposed to be straight, yeah, and if you, as kids are growing up, if you get them to bend forward and their spine starts to curve, if it curves too much, they'll... If you want to be successful, you've always got to continue to be a student. I think if you are successful in what you do, but then you start to just get busy in doing, and forget about the learning, it's a difficult situation. So wonderful that EO are here because they provide great opportunities for learning, and you need to continue to do that. Take the time out to do it. He said to me, well, here's some advice for you. This is what he said to me in terms of trying to win gold. He said, forget the scoreboard. He said, forget the results. He said, you've got to know exactly what you want to achieve. You've got to have goals and set goals, but don't spend time worrying about whether you're going to achieve the results or the scoreboard. He said, what you've got to spend the time doing right and doing really well is the actual process to get you there. And if you get that process right, which in essence is what do you do every day, and even what do you do every hour of the day, what do you do every minute of the day, that's going to get you to where you need to be and get you the result that you want to aspire to. A lot of people think as an athlete we have 4 years, and if you stuff up, you've got to wait another 4 years. Stuff up, you've got to wait another 4 years. It's a long process, so you've got to spend that whole 4 years trying to get that process absolutely right. So then when you go and run, it's not who ran the best on the day, it's who has done that process the best over that 4 years that gets the result. So then when you actually go and compete on a stage in front of a capacity stadium, you don't actually feel too nervous because you know the hard work's already done. You know that the process is that all you've got to do is just run because you've done everything. The results have already been shown. Yeah, particularly in athletics. At that high level, you can't really stuff up too much. It's the work that you've done in between. So I left this coach and I thought, okay, I'll go home and I know I've got my goal set, but I really work on my process. And I only had 1 year to try and get that right. I went to the Sydney Games and I actually travelled with my medals. I thought you'd love to see. Oh, yes, you can take that one. Now, I'd open it up and tell people, is it gold?
Yeah, gold.
Is it gold? So I was going for 3 gold and I came back with this first one, which is bronze. Take them out and have a look. They're beautiful medals, and this one was for my 200 metres in Sydney, and yes, it's bronze, and a lot of people ask me how much they're worth, and in Australia we used to have 1 and 2 cent coins, so we only now have 5 cent coins, 10 cent coins, but we used to have 1 and 2 cent coins, and so when the games came to Australia, the Australian Mint decided to melt down some of their wastage, so they turned the bronze, and our 1 and 2 cent coins, were bronze, so I forgot to tell you that. So that's melted down old 1 and 2 cent coins, so it's worth at least 3 cents if you wanted to know the value of that one. And then I competed in the 400 and 100 and came back with 2 of these, but I've only brought one with me today. Is it gold? Oop. No, it wants to run away. It's silver. I won 2 silver and a bronze. And yes, have you? Do you think I was happy?
No. After gold, no?
Happier than before, yeah, because I won a couple of medals, yeah. I wasn't actually. I'm happy and always thankful for winning medals because it's better than coming fourth and better than coming last. But do you know what I was disappointed about? I didn't actually run a PB in either of those races to win those medals. A PB. Do you know what a PB is? Personal best. Yeah. So in sport, if it's a pretty much known, even for kids growing up in Australia, we'll say to kids, as long as you do a PB at school in a certain sporting event, that's your absolute best. We know that you've done your best. So that's kind of how our culture comes up. I had to even run a personal best time to win those medals, and that's what was devastating for me, because there was stuff there that I could have done better. And after speaking to this particular coach that gave me that advice to develop the process, 1 year wasn't enough. So I came back from the Sydney Games disappointed because I was going for gold and 1 silver. And I thought if I want to get back to a gold medal level, I'm going to have to do some things to make a change. If I don't want to get back to a gold medal level, that's okay, because silver's okay. Bronze is okay. If that's what you choose is okay. If you're happy with silver level and you're happy with bronze, or if you're happy with nothing, that's okay, because that's your decision. But I knew that that wasn't my best. So I came back and I thought, what can I do to get back to a gold medal level? Because if I'm going to do something, it's going to be done to my absolute best. So I'm just going to go through a couple of things now that I think you'll be able to find useful, that helped me to try and get back to a gold medal level. One of the biggest realisations I had after the Sydney Games was one of the reasons why I didn't run a PB was because I'd actually spread myself too thin doing too many things. So in the year of 2000 I was in my final year of physiotherapy at university, and that's a high number of hours, intense, you have to be there, full-time placement, it's about 35 contact hours a week. My parents, I've moved out of home since I was 17, they still live an hour away from my home, so I had to sort of run my own household. I worked 20 hours a week just to earn some money. I was training around 30 hours a week. I'd said yes to so many opportunities that had come my way since winning my first gold, and I was trying to have a bit of a life, that when I actually looked at everything that I was doing in my whole life, they were all at a pretty much silver, if not worse level. So at uni I could normally get high distinctions, I was just getting credits. You know, I was passing. I just didn't have any more time left in my schedule to actually perform any better. And that was a pretty big, scary realisation actually. I've actually lost because of the way I positioned my whole life. So what did I do to try and get back to a gold medal level? The first thing I did was actually, and I'll just pop down a couple of points here. I'm not going to go into these because you'll be great at them, but just reflect on how good you do them. So setting goals, I'm sure you do really well. I won't talk about goal setting, but I'm sure you all know how important it is to make sure you've got a measurement tool and know where you're going. But the most important part in terms of goal setting is defining the process. A lot of people write down the goal and say, yeah, I want to achieve this, and they just hope that it happens. That's a good starting point because at least you're acknowledging it, if you share it with others, you become more accountable. But a lot of people don't then go down to the next layer of what is the actual process. You will do this well within your business because you have to work the process to make sure other people can do what you do and you want them to do well. But once you define what the actual process is to achieving goals, then have you got enough time to actually get the result that you want? Do you need to employ more people? Do you need to re-strategise your business? Or if it's your own personal goal outside of work, have you got enough time to do the things that are important? I gave you the example, if I was to win gold, I didn't have enough time. You know, I was a fantastic time manager. I was always at things, I'd get to everything, but my quality wasn't there. It was just good quantity of stuff. So I could never get any more time. I mean, who would like more time? Are you all super busy? Has it been really hard to come up here and take some time out? Are some of you sitting there struggling with it a little bit, thinking, oh, yeah? While I'm talking to you, you've probably been sitting there thinking, oh, I really probably should have stayed, and you're probably thinking about stuff that you're doing, and, you know, to take that time out is massive because we can't get any more time. But what I wasn't doing well was priority managing. So I was a fantastic time manager, but I'm a priority manager. So I had to learn what my priorities were. So one of the first things I actually did, and I continue to do this every year for my whole life, not just my work life, my family life, is actually write down what's really important to me. You guys might be fabulous with this stuff in your business. I'm sure you are, because you wouldn't be here if you're not. But maybe think of it outside of your business. You know, if you've got amazing strengths that are within your business, can you take those strengths to your life outside, or sort of when you leave work, do you turn off all your strengths and get home and, you know, life is just a bit more disorganised? I probably can imagine it could be, yeah? I know I do that the same. My strengths, even as in what I do as a business, sometimes I go home and I turn those strengths off and I parent my kids and I go, oh my God, I can't believe I just said that. You know, I didn't mean to shout at the kids, or, you know, my strengths is not that normally, but at home somehow we turn off the stuff that we're really good at doing because we're tired. Yeah, and we don't really prioritise a lot of stuff for ourselves outside of work. So what I actually did, once I worked out what my really important priorities were, then I actually list, and I continue to do this, list the things that I've said yes to in my whole life. So yes, I said yes to my husband, I'm married. Yes, I said yes to 3 kids. They're really important priorities. I can't get out of those ones. I can for 10 days, which is lovely. I must admit, I'm really enjoying being here, kid-free, husband-free for 10 days, which is lovely. Doesn't happen very often. But what else did I say yes to? My list was so long of yes things. At least I wrote it out. I had to kind of declutter my life. I needed to find time. And the only way I could find time was by priority managing. So once I'd written everything out, because I was a good time manager, I actually then applied the time management 4Ds principle to that, and I still do this. So what can you do? So do is the process. That's the things that are vitally important. What can you delegate? I'm sure you could probably sit there and think now, yeah, I really just don't need to be doing that. I could give that to someone else to do. They'd have a great learning experience from. What could I delay? What did I say yes to that I didn't mean to say yes to, that I wish I said no to, but I didn't know how to say no to, so I said yes anyway? And some of those things probably take us away from, you know, a family and time out with family, because we've said yes to some things that really we probably could have delayed. Or delete. You know, what things in your life do you really not need to be doing that you did say yes to, that you didn't wish you did, but you're just not sure how to get out of it? Yeah? Anyone relate to that?
Yes.
Yeah. I did some work recently in Adelaide with the fire service, the Metro Fire Service, and they're going through. Yeah, divorce. Yeah, it was an Australian attitude if we didn't do any of that, you know. And it was a good one to add, because it was thinking, well, really, you know, I do all this stuff, but what is my priority? What is real meaning to me? And do I take enough time out to look after the things that are the most important? And often that can be our family. And often when we say yes to too many things, who suffers? Yeah, everyone around, our loved ones around us. I know I've gone through all of this myself. So what did I do then next? Who finds it hard to say no? Are you good at saying no because you're entrepreneurs and you run your own businesses, or are you good at saying no to some things but other things? Who reckons they find it hard to say no? Interesting. Yeah, okay. It's just a great human skill, isn't it, that we actually like to help people. Because we're driven to say yes because we like to help and we like to serve. But a great strength taken out to its extreme becomes a weakness. So when we say yes too many times, it becomes a weakness. So what did I do to learn to say no? I actually employed somebody to say no for me, which you guys could probably all do if you find it hard. Just speak to that person and they'll say no for me, because I didn't like to let people down. And I thought, that's not a good solution. I've actually got to learn to change this behaviour, because if I don't change, in another year or 2 years' time, I'll spread myself so thin again and I'll just end up in the same rut, exactly the same pattern, because it's a behaviour change that needs to happen. It's not just a quick fix. So I thought, well, okay, now I've actually got my process. Now I know what my priorities are. Now I know what my process is. Now I know I've got this amount of time. If someone comes to me and says, Katrina, can I have some time? Like, can you do this for me? I'll basically then look at my list of stuff, and then I use the 4Ds. And if it's not aligned to where I'm actually at, it's easy actually for me to say no, because it's actually not going to fit into where I currently am and to my priorities. But before I didn't have that, before I didn't have my priorities and my time schedule, it was easy to say yes because I didn't really know how much time I actually had. I'm actually at capacity now in my life. I know I'm at time capacity. So if someone comes to me and says to me, Katrina, could you go on this board? I mean, you probably have the same things. Being successful in business, people want you to do a lot of stuff in the community, which is great, which is important, really important corporate social responsibility. But it might be something else in terms of business. And if that opportunity comes my way, I'll say, I'll just get back to you. Then I actually look at everything that I've got, and I think if that's really important and I want to say yes to that, then I've got to delete, delay or delegate something in my list to fit it in, because otherwise it just doesn't fit. And I have to work really hard at that, because otherwise I start to get too thin again. And I just wanted to add that next one in, is say yes, though, to the things that are really important to you, that do make you uncomfortable. And I wonder whether, I'm sure this still happens, it's just about being human, but for you guys to be entrepreneurs, you're people that are happy to take risks, you've taken risks. You're innovative, you're prepared to do a lot of things that a lot of people in life wouldn't do, put things on the line, and so when something comes your way that is a yes, that's aligned to where you're going, but might make you uncomfortable, they're the good things to do. And what I mean by uncomfortable often is with our own internal dialogue as well. It's like, I really would like to do that, but I probably won't do that because what's going on inside. Maybe I'm not good enough, maybe I need to do that more, maybe they'll find out that I'm a bit of a fraud, maybe, whatever it is. So they're for me the things that I continue to follow. I'm going to go back to this one as well when I talked about sport before. Hands up if you would spend once a week 30 minutes doing something for yourself, with yourself, that would re-energise you physically and mentally. It doesn't have to be sport, but something that makes you feel good. Yeah? Hands up if you do one session a week. Good. Keep your hands up if it's 2. Yeah? Hands up if it's 3. Great. Any more? Then you will be 4 or 5, whatever it is. Yeah. Fantastic. Do you know 3 by 30 minutes a week of doing something for yourself to actually re-energise yourself is only 1% of your time? Yeah, 1% of your energy. And if you can't schedule, I find this one an interesting one, if you can't find time throughout your week to schedule some time, and some of you do well, to actually make you feel good, perform better, and it's only 1% of your time, then that's something you could look at doing. We tend to just get so task focused, we get so caught up in our businesses that we think we've got so many tasks to do that we don't ever step out to actually re-energise physically and mentally. You guys have done well to come here, but to do it just once a year, to come out and step out for 2 days is magical. But how can you then take this and how good you feel back to your everyday week? Yeah? So your aim, your goal, if you could do 3 sessions of 30 minutes to re-energise yourself. Whatever it is, it might not be exercise for some of you, maybe it's something completely different. If you don't know what it is, then maybe you need to spend time watching your activities, and if you feel good afterwards, maybe start planning them into your week. So how do you do it? Who runs off a diary? I'm sure all of you, yeah? Or do you all run electronic calendars, diaries?
Yeah.
No? Some of you don't? Okay. Is it just for your business life, or does it sort of your life out of business? 24/7, so your whole personal life and business life? Or only business? Okay. See, there's that thing again. As soon as business turns off, our life just becomes a bit more unplanned. Yeah. So how I've done this in the past to make sure it happens is I schedule time in with myself. It's a meeting with myself. And I schedule it into my calendar, whether it's at 5:30 at night or whatever time, 7 in the whatever time works for you. And I schedule in 5 times because I know that at least 2 times something urgent will come up at work that I actually have to go to. But if it's there 5, I'm going to guarantee to get 3 in. And it's in my diary as a meeting with myself. But if someone rings and says, "Oh, Katrina, can we actually meet up at this particular time?" Unless it's urgent and important, I just say, "No, I've actually got a meeting." I don't say it's with myself. But it's just actually saying, you know what, I'm important. And if I actually invest time in myself, I'm going to be better as a leader, I'm going to be better for my staff, I'm actually going to be a better dad or a husband, whatever it is. But this is often a thing that gets left off our list of things because we're so busy doing other stuff. So for me, that was vitally important, which still continues to be. Okay, now time for just a bit of fun. Area of focus was another important thing. So once I actually learned my goals and priorities, the process, how did I actually learn to stay focused to achieve them? And even then going down to another layer is how do you actually learn to stay focused and in the moment? If you Google multitasking, a lot of people think multitasking is a good thing to do, but if you Google, is multitasking good? Yeah, it actually will tell you multitasking leads to poor performance. So it's a good chance to actually say, well, how good is my focus skill? My brain is my tool to learn to focus. Am I good at focusing on things? Or do I tend to jump from one thing to the other? Yeah. So I want to do something now just to break it up and have a bit of fun. I'm going to get you to do an activity. You just need to find a partner. And I'll give you 5 minutes just to have a crack at this. But it involves putting something together and doing something at the same time just to test out your multitasking abilities. So if you just want to partner up, and can you sit around the table so you've got something to work on? And I'm going to, once you're sitting next to each other, I'll hand you something to have a crack at doing. So just in pairs around a table, or if you want to sit on the floor or something, and then I can pass something out to you. Okay. So either turn and face a table, or that's okay. You just need something to lean on. It will make sense in a minute, but I don't want to tell you what I'm doing because it'll give you a... I'll probably go. Maybe this one. Okay, so this activity involves one of you having your eyes closed. Okay, so let's say just pick someone in your group who's got their eyes closed. Now the person with their eyes closed, you got a bite, something.
One person has to use that.
The person with their eyes closed is allowed to use their hands, okay? Now the person with their eyes open are not allowed to use their hands. Okay, so if you don't trust yourself, you might want to sit on your hands or... Okay, now I'm going to pass something to you, and I want the person with their eyes closed to close their eyes now, because I don't want them to see what we're doing. Okay? It'll make sense in a minute.
बंद गरेर कि
One over there.
Oh, I cannot use my hands.
Okay, one more for this group.
Who gets this?
Does anyone else want to have a... we'll leave a couple of spare ones. Keep your eyes closed. Okay, so... Where's those pieces of paper and pencil? So the person who's got their eyes open, can you have a piece of paper in front of you with a pencil and just the back of the page? Yep. Okay, so you're only allowed to write.
How do you read it?
You're only allowed to write. Okay, so what the people who can write, what I want you to actually write is this: multitasking leads to poorer performance, which actually says that up on the screen. But you're not allowed to write it as a whole sentence. What you've actually got to do is write the letter M, okay, and then I want you to write the letter A under it for the alphabet. Letter A, sorry. Letter A for the alphabet.
Like in the school.
Yep,
M-A.
exactly. Then I
M-A.
want you to write the letter U for multi, and then the letter B under it, okay? And then I want you to write the letter L for multi, and then the letter C. Okay, so what you're trying to do is write multitasking leads to poor performance, and at the same time you're trying to write the alphabet underneath. Do you get that? So you write the letter M on top, and then you write underneath the letter A.
All right.
For the alphabet, A. Sorry, is my pronunciation. A, B, C, D, A, E.
That's the way we say it.
Okay, so you're trying to write two sentences. The first top sentence says multitasking
Like
leads to
this.
poor performance, and then the second sentence underneath is the alphabet. But I don't want you to write it as two separate. I want you to go from one letter to the letter underneath. One letter, okay. So that's your first task. Does that make sense? Yeah, are we all good?
So I close it.
Yep, that's right. And then you write letter L, and then you write C, a letter T, and then a D, then the letter I, and then the letter E, then the multitasking T, and then an F.
Okay.
Is everyone good? I'll just make sure I set that one up.
You cheated.
Okay.
I am
Are we
right.
all good with that? Do you need me to show you? Yep.
M, U.
Yep. Then you write letter L, and then the letter C underneath.
So you write multitasking
Yep.
full, is it?
Yep. And the letter T for multi, and the letter D. And what's after multi? I, and then the letter E.
Partner.
Okay, and then you keep going, multitasking, so T and F. I think you're all
Keep on
good.
closing eyes.
Okay, yeah, sorry for the... Yep, keep your eyes closed, because I've just got to get them set up. Okay, now stop that activity, all right? So you've got to do that at the same time as working with your partner. Now, in your bag, you've got something to put together, which I've pulled apart. So you have to get your partner who can't see but can use their hand to actually build whatever I've given you, okay? At the same time, I want you to complete that whole sentence. So not only are you trying to give instructions to your partner to build whatever it is, you've actually got to make sure you finish what you're writing on the paper at the same time. Okay, so I'll give you about 5 minutes. Has anyone got any questions?
We can't touch it. We can't touch it.
You can't touch it. You can only touch the pencil. Do
Give it back.
you need a partner?
Write it again. So what to do
Anyone got a partner? Anyone want to do?
Anyone free for this?
Anyone free? Or you want to just join in?
Hemant. Yeah, I'm Pragun.
Oh, here's a partner. And there's a spare, grab a bag over there. There's a
What do I do?
spare.
You can just tell me. You can't do anything. What is this?
Yep, you've got to put that together. So you might need to be on a table. Hence why if you lean on the table, it might help you.
Table mat. Okay.
Now we have to table.
What is this?
Does anyone else need a quick? Yep. Okay. Yep.
What do I do?
So you've got your eyes closed.
So what is this? Head. Okay, head. I got the head. This one. Right. So what is this?
So
That's the body. That's the body.
Look for the head. It's the smallest piece. Smallest piece. Smallest piece. Oh, the head.
No. Yes, the other way around. The other way
Also
around.
got it. Is everyone okay?
Which
It's good. So thank you there. Just take the moment to set up. That's all.
In the middle. In the middle. In the middle. In the middle. In the middle.
Yeah. So get hold of the head, the smallest piece.
घुमाउँदा पुरा घुमाउनु पुरा.
Okay.
अर्को चाहिँ
So
घुमाउनु.
you're supposed to put that knob on that hole at the bottom.
पुरा 360 degrees. अझै. Oh, right. Now, yeah, put that in. Yes.
Like everybody's okay?
Yes. Okay.
So this is another body.
This is a knob.
घुमाउँदा त्यसलाई पुरा.
This is like dolo on the big pieces. Right. No, go to the. Yeah. Go to your middle finger top. Oh, that's the top. The neck kumuni there's a that dolo golo छ नि. The neck kumuni. हैन त्यो त horn. Horn को मुनि छ.
Face down.
Face down. टाउकोमा जोड्नु आयो. जिउमा जोड्नु पर्यो. जिउमा.
So this is body.
Yeah.
This side is body.
Yeah. No. Exactly. This side ma उल्टो भयो.
Yeah. Have you finished your job though?
The last one.
Tasking
This is the
leads
last
for a
one.
performance?
So this one, where is the head? Where do we put this?
Go for the bottom. Okay, that's the bottom hip joint.
I think this is
Your wing side.
Yeah.
That's wing. Oh.
No, that's right.
Yeah, तल भयो. माथि अझै माथि. Oh, यहाँ पाल छ एउटा पाल.
Touch one. That's I don't know the body. I think. Just forget this. That's the cue. And
You've got two tasks to do. If you finish the Lego figure, then make sure you finish your writing.
There's the leg.
And then if you finish all that, just count the mistakes you made.
कहाँ पनि त्यो हेलमेट त लगाइदिनु पर्छ नि
How are we going?
going crazy. I don't know. That's the right thing, the wrong place.
I can't see the black knob.
No, there's two knobs like
Okay, there's a
Yeah, look for the black one.
horn.
yeah.
And there's a horn.
Watch
There's a
your
knob
colours,
here.
don't say
There's
this.
two knobs.
Okay, yeah.
So that's the one you're holding is a
Okay, now there's a
hand on
socket
that.
here.
No, that's the base. No, that's not a
So these
socket.
are pretty
That's
simple
not
tasks,
a
really.
socket.
Putting together some Lego figures and writing out some sentences.
Okay, right. Okay, there's a knob
I
here.
can't even do it with his eyes open.
You haven't had boys. Boys and Lego.
Just gonna take a while. When
Vipin, my God.
Keep going. You've got time pressures now.
These are already gone.
It's gone. Okay. 30 seconds. See if you can complete what you've done. Good work.
Actually, it's very easy.
अब मिसिन न छ ल कुटै निकाल्नु Feel like a Barbie doll, man.
Okay, last 5
Give me
seconds.
W, X, Y, Z.
Okay, done.
Okay, I give
4,
up, man.
3, 2, 1. Now open your eyes if you haven't and have a look at
We
what
got
you were
that,
trying
but
to
we got
create.
that. We really messed up in here.
Okay. So if you're a detailed person and you want to put the person together or finish what you need
I was
to do.
confused with this and the
All right. So let's just have a bit of a chat. How did you go? What did you think?
See, the thing is,
Yep.
It was like we were actually doing three things.
You were doing 3
Three
things.
things.
Yep.
One was making the multitasking. I don't remember what's
That's basically it.
Yeah. And then what is next on ABCD as well,
Yep.
and then instructing him to. Although I had to redo it, so I was finished with that.
Yes.
But when I was doing this bit, so it was still confusing.
Yeah.
The two things.
Yeah.
Two things, multitasking.
Yeah.
So obviously made errors.
Made errors. Yep. Who found it hard?
Every alphabet you had to get back to A and then start again.
Yeah, exactly. So they say if you actually distract yourself from doing something, it takes 15 minutes to get back to the original task that you're doing. Now, if we add in a mobile phone, an email, so there's a computer going, a mobile phone's going, and we're trying to work on an important business strategy, yep, they're your three things. Yeah, and if we get 15 minutes to get back, so there's time wasting, 25% more errors. And have a look, you know, you think you could do the alphabet, you know, we're so good at that, we're so good at writing sentences. Lego figures, you know, if you play with them as kids, you'd probably be able to put them together reasonably well. But you throw it into the mix, it's just a simple way to see that multitasking leads to poor performance.
The whole thing nowadays they're encouraging multitasking.
What was that?
That's easy. We got to go
In today's world, multitasking is
Yeah.
encouraged.
See, that's the thing. And someone just said they encourage multitasking. And it's interesting because men traditionally have always been pretty good at focusing on one task. I don't know if you have that sort of joke in it's probably a global joke, but it's a fantastic skill. That if men say they can just do one thing at a time, I wish I was born in a man in that sense, because when I reflected back onto the way I was born into my family, my mother is a multitasker and still is. She does about 20 things at the same time. Particularly
Probably the only woman that I've heard that say
Yeah.
that men, I wish I could just do one thing at a time.
Yeah.
Most women think like, why do you do that?
Yes. Well, because they don't know, they haven't done the research. But the thing is, that women think multitasking has been a good thing. But the research shows that it doesn't, because, and let me tell you about my family. My mum does about 20 things at once, and just as an example, at home, she'll put the washing in, and then she'll go back a day later to put another load in. Forgot that she put a load in, so she has to re-wash that load and then do the next load. She can often, she's a good cook, but she can burn things. She'll tell me things about 5 times because she doesn't even focus in when she's telling me something to realise that, oh, she's actually told me something. Now, her mum, my grandmother, was a fantastic multitasker too, and I was role modelled on multitasking. So for me, as a young person trying to get to a good level in performance, when I actually met my husband, this is my moment where I realised that multitasking and focus wasn't a good skill of mine. We were out at a restaurant for dinner, and I was sitting there and thought it was fantastic because, you know, it's just him and I were having dinner together, how romantic. And I was checking my phone, and someone walked in, and I had a bit of a look, and oh, what was that noise over there? And just distracted. But because I'd seen my role model family of being distracted, I just thought that was the normal thing. And he actually stopped and he said to me, Katrina, have you got something better to do? And I said, no, this is fantastic, you know, we're having dinner together. He said, well, you've obviously got something more important to do because you're not here with me. He said, I'd prefer you go and fix whatever you need to fix, and then come back and spend at least 5 minutes with me. If that's all I get, I'd prefer 5 minutes of you with me instead of the rest of the time with you not with me. And I just sat there and went, oh my God, it's the first time. I'm so grateful for my husband because he'll tell me how things are and where areas that you need improvement, and I see that as a great chance to learn. Initially, sometimes it can be a bit heartbreaking when someone tells you don't do something so well. And I just went, wow, I actually do that. Even in my relationships. When I'm meeting people, I'm actually not staying completely focused. I'm multitasking in my brain. I'm using phones, I'm using computers. And I thought, wow, if I want to have a good performance with my husband in a relationship, this is something that's important to him, I need to fix this. And then I realised that I was probably doing it in my athletic career, in my work career, in my university career. So from that point in time, I thought, okay, if I can learn to focus and avoid multitasking as much as I can, then that's obviously going to help my performance. I'm going to be able to turn my performance from silver to gold even better. So multitasking, in a sense, if you read the research, they'll say it's okay if you're doing 2 pretty non-stressful brain, you know, we don't use brain too much. So say if you have to iron, which I avoid doing, but if I have to iron something, they say it's okay if you're having, doing 2 things at once. But just think about it in terms of your business. When you sit to do something really important, can you switch off your phone? Yeah? Can you divert your phone to somebody else? Can you turn off your emails? And can you just sit there for that period of time and focus? Because you would be more efficient and you'd make less mistakes. So what I say to people, spend the next week when you go back to work and you've come out of this nice retreat where you've slowed down a bit, and actually sit there and get back into that week and say, wow, look how much I do. I'm a bit scattered. You know, can I get a bit better at that? Can I learn to switch things off? And you know, technology's taken us to a point of terrible multitasking. You know, something I've decided to do in Australia is to never ever drive and use my mobile phone ever again. I only did this 2 weeks ago. I hopped in a car simulator and realised if you look down for 1 second, this simulator that I went to, a little kid ran across the road. In 1 second, you're just looking down and up. And I just went, wow, we are multitasking. We are driving a machine on the road and we're multitasking using our phones. Everyone does it in Australia. You get big fines, but what broke my heart even more recently in Adelaide was a 19-year-old boy had a car accident and died. And his parents found, or the police found his phone on the floor and it had a half-written text message. And I just went, I have 3 boys in the back of my car. If they see me at the lights, even checking a message or making a phone call, what am I role modelling to them to say that it's okay to use your phone? So for me, it's a great example of focus and multitasking. Because we drive every day, we don't think it's ever going to happen to us, but if it did change and happen to you, I'm sure that'd be something that you could learn to probably do better. So have a bit of a think. Could you just become a bit more efficient? How could you focus better in your meetings with your clients, or with your kids, or with your wife? Can you learn to just compartmentalise? Can you just learn to switch some of that thinking off and switch it back on? And this is not easy stuff, but it's important stuff, as we all know. One of the last areas that I worked on to try and get my performance back to a gold medal level was actually dealing with my thoughts and my head. As I said from the early point on that I used a sports psychologist to help me make this decision. I've always used sports psychologists throughout my whole career. If athletes want to get back to a gold medal level, at a highest level you'll find most sporting teams and most athletes use psychologists. Why? What does a psychologist do?
Focus.
Teaches you focus, teaches you
Thoughts, control the thoughts.
how do you control your thoughts. Did anyone want to say anything else?
Brainwashing.
Brainwashing. It learns to perform at your best. Motivation. Okay, so athletes want to perform at their best. They want to learn how to switch off their unwanted thoughts. If I go to start on 100 metres and my thoughts are going, you're not going to win this race, you're not good enough.
Oh.
You know, you've got to be careful what you expect, because that's what you get. Yeah? So we need to learn how to control our thoughts, how to switch on the good ones, turn off the ones that aren't so workable, how to motivate ourselves, how to fire ourselves up, how to compartmentalise. No, I can't even say it.
Compartment.
There you go, compartmentalise. There's my jet lag and my lack of sleep. But in life, I'm sure it's exactly like this in Nepal. You probably never have been to a psychologist ever. And when would you go to a psychologist if you would in Nepal?
In the hospital.
If you're completely crazy.
When you're crazy, when you're depressed, when you've lost it, did someone say? When you're burnt out, stressed out, worn out, or grief, or... We go there when we've hit rock bottom.
Yeah.
So I don't get this. If these people, and if you go to the right one or you read the right books, can tell us how to perform and how to use our mind to be our most powerful tool, why do we only go to them when we hit rock bottom?
But they give us drugs, though.
They give us drugs, yeah, that's what we go there for the drugs. So for me, a passion of mine has actually been to try and fill this gap in Australia, but even just to have that, just to say that to your wall. You know, if you want to perform at your best and turn silver to gold, is there things that you can learn to do with your brain? I watched this amazing movie on the plane yesterday called Lucy. I don't know if anyone's seen it yet. Have you seen it? Yes. Wow. Like, you know, I watched it just going, this is the stuff that I love. You know, when you get to, if you learn to use 100% of your brain, they make this chemical that she could learn to use 100% of her brain. She was non-existent, she was just everywhere. Yet we only learn, you use 10%, or 10%, I think it was.
Normally
10%.
No, 5 to 6%.
5 to 6%. So, and that's...
Einstein was 8%.
Yeah, okay.
In a conscious manner.
Yeah.
Unconsciously use 100%.
No. Well,
You're sending... No.
That's what the movie says.
okay, so here's our lunchtime conversation. But anyway, can you just see what I'm talking about? You know, there seems to be this gap. So what have I done? I've used sports psychologists. I've read a mountain of books. I've done training in this area. I should have been a psychologist instead of a physio. I've just recently done 5 days of resilience training with a company out of the US called Resilient Works, and they are actually rolling out resilience training, mindful training, performance training to the US soldiers. The whole US Army they want their soldiers not only to be physically fit, but they want them to be psychologically fit. So they're teaching them how to be mindful, how to be focused, how to deal with unwanted thoughts, how to deal with good thoughts. All the skills that athletes are lucky enough to learn, but no one else teaches us in life. You know, in my city, we're trying to get this into schools, into state schools, to teach our young kids how to be more resilient and how to use their minds to help them perform better, which is pretty amazing.
Even basic counselling would be good.
Basic counselling, agree. These are life skills. So for me, I was lucky enough to learn how to use these skills. I just want to share one skill with you that you might be able to take away. And this doesn't happen overnight, you know, it's something you've got to work on. So how did I kind of learn to deal with these thoughts? What I did with the psychologist firstly was to spend a week doing a bit of a thought diary. Some of you may have tried to lose weight before. You might do a food diary. That might have been a diary. Athletes do that all the time. We do a food diary, we'll do a thought diary, but I actually watched my thoughts over a week to see when my thoughts were good and if my thoughts were hindering me in any way. And after a while I realised that I did have a lot of thoughts about I'm not good enough, I don't know if I'll win gold, am I good enough, or am I good enough at other things in life? I hate doing that, I better not say yes to that. Sometimes people find that I'm a fraud. What happens if they don't like me? Or I might not fit in. And when I actually spent time listening to my thoughts, I realised I'd programmed my thoughts a similar way to many things because of the way I was brought up about trying to hide and trying to make sure I could fit in. That was my first realisation of actually going, oh, okay, there's a me inside that's listening to my thoughts. They're not me, they're just a part of me. So I can choose to turn them up or down. So a strategy that I used, I suppose the first good strategy to realise that, and through the stuff that I've done, is that all thoughts are good, all emotions are good. I don't know what sort of stuff you've done, but have you heard from a lot of people that you shouldn't think negative thoughts are bad, you've got to get rid of them? Yeah, which has probably been the majority of the school of thought for many years. Don't think negative, you've got to push them away, fight them. If you think negative, you're not human, you're weak. But negative thoughts are not a sign of a weak mind, they're a sign of a human mind. And if you think back to where we first came from, like think back to the cave people days, back when there was 4 things in life all we had to do. What were our 4 things we had to do to just survive and to be here as humans today? Eat, sleep, reproduce, or let's just say sex is easier. Yep. And
survive.
Yeah, or warmth. So shelter, warmth, sex, food, and pretty simple life. Imagine if they were just, but it's interesting though, when I walk up to these mountains, and I was talking to someone just saying, wow, this is back to the day where this is the 4 things, it's survival living, isn't it? But if we in those days had a mind where we were just optimistic and positive and never had a negative thought, we'd probably walk out there and be murdered straight away. Say if we left our shelter, our warm place of shelter, to go hunt for some food. As soon as we walk out, if we thought everything was rosy and everything was great, we'd probably be murdered straight away and we wouldn't be here as a race, as human beings. So even from that early days, our minds were programmed to think and to protect us. And to kind of think negative. So if we walked out and we heard a noise, we'd go, oh, what was that noise? Okay, I better just hide. Oh, what was that? We'd just basically be in protection mode. So negative thoughts are just a protection mode. We've evolved, but our minds haven't. You guys have, because to be entrepreneurs, you would have had to make a decision there to just stop some of that chatter and believe in yourself, to take some risks and to do something. There's a lot of people out there, which probably include a lot of your staff, and even yourself, because we're not perfect at this, that would still get caught up in those thoughts of, oh, if I do that, what will people think? Will I be good enough? And it's not a bad thing, those negative thoughts. They're just giving us a chance to assess the risks and the challenges. They're just trying to protect us. So they want to make us, be okay. And I think when you realise that, in the old school of thought is that they're bad, you've got to hide them, you've got to get rid of them. If I said to you for the next 30 seconds, see if you could think only positive thoughts. Have a go at it. Has anyone already thought of a negative thought? Probably. Yeah. Is everyone out? It's pretty hard to not do it.
Easily turn a positive into negative.
Yeah. And you might even have that thought of, oh, I don't think I can do this, I won't be able to do it. Yeah. Even just to try and not have a negative thought, you can't ever get rid of it. So the best thing I learned as an athlete was negative thoughts are good. They're going to help me assess my risks and my challenges. But when they become unworkable is when I listen to them too much and I don't know how to turn them down. I want to listen to the ones that are workable and the ones that help me perform at my best. So that's where the psychologist helped. What can you do to help be more mindful? What can you do to turn your radio? How I've envisaged it is my thought radio. Like I can turn them down and I can turn them up. And that's kind of what I'm teaching my kids as they grow up, is that you have control over listening to these things. They're just thought, they're just word, they're not fact. They're just something that you can learn to turn up and turn down. And so I think when you can do that in life, it's pretty extraordinary, because then you can perform, at the absolute best in most situations. One really simple task that I had, how this affected me was, with my right hand, I have always hated carrying really full cups of hot coffee, because this is the side that's affected me. And when I actually looked at my thoughts, I often had this thought in my mind come up, oh, you're not good enough, your right side's stupid. This is how my brain had been programmed from a young kid to think this, so I tried to hide it right from the beginning. And so I've done all this mind work for many years, and I got up here and thought I'd pretty much got over these thoughts, and went to pick up this cup of coffee only about a year ago, and as soon as I put my hand on the cup, my mind just went, oh, stupid right side, you can't actually pick that up. And I thought, wow, I thought I'd gotten over this, but my mind's still going to keep telling me this same story. But I've evolved to a point where I actually was able to say, oh, there you go, there's that story again. Thanks, mind, for telling me that. But I'm just going to let you go. And I've learnt strategies of how to let some of those thoughts go. I was able to pick the cup up and carry it for the first time in my whole life. Just the power of the thought based on something so small. So I just wanted to touch on that. I'm not going to go into any more about that, because it's just for you to even think about it as something that you could add to your toolkit. Could you get better at dealing with your thoughts? Or your staff, how could you help others around you to perform at their best? So by doing these things, setting goals, defining the process, staying focused, decluttering my life, using the 4 Ds so I can perform at my best, learning to say no, learning to say yes to the stuff that puts me out of my comfort zone, making sure that I've got time to schedule in for myself to re-energise physically and mentally, and then learning to actually deal with my thoughts. I finally went back to my last games in 2004. I've just got a few slides there, which is all that I've just spoken about. And who was my unveiler before? Was it you? It's in a sock. After 8 years of winning silver, and a few more silvers, I finally won a gold medal again for the 400 metre race in Athens, which was just extraordinary. And I ran a PB, which makes it even worthwhile. So after winning 8 years of silver, I can tell you what, when you win gold again, silver really does suck. And I'm sure you've kind of got that attitude too. You want to be your best. You want to get the best results with yourself, but also with your business and what you do. And when you get to that point and you just know that it worked, it's pretty extraordinary. Yeah, it is. So just to wrap up, and then I might just open up for questions and let's just have some food, is that my story has been an extraordinary one that I never ever imagined I'd become a Paralympian. I'd never ever thought that could be something I could be. It has opened up so many tremendous doors for me, not only as an athlete, but since I've finished competing as an athlete, I now get to do stuff globally with the International Paralympic Committee and my own stuff, even being here today, which is just extraordinary. Winning gold is amazing, representing your country is amazing, learning how to perform at your best is incredible. I'm not perfect at this, I'm learning still how to do it. But at least if you know and you can assess your own performance each week, you're on the right track. My hardest challenge now is I've chosen to have 3 boys, and that is your biggest test, to then try and make sure that you can teach them the best knowledge for them to be the best that they can be. And I think even just reflection that movie Lucy that's what life is. It's about passing as the simplest form, isn't it? They say it's about passing a cell down to the next generation. So what you do in terms of your performance, if you choose to have kids, is how can you create the next generation to be better and better and better? What are you role modelling? You know, what can you do to perform better in your own life and in your own business life? But the best thing I learned out of this whole journey was actually learn to actually love who I am and actually be proud to stand up here today and say that I actually love the fact that I have a difference. You know, in business, you're always looking for that point of difference, right? And I just didn't know that my point of difference was something that I just didn't like about myself. And when I actually learned that that was something that I could turn into a strength and not a weakness and just really use to the best of my ability, that was an amazing moment. To stand up here now and not have to worry about hiding all the energy that you waste in trying to hide something, and at the end of the day, for what? It's always just answering your thoughts of, am I good enough? Will people like me? Will I fit in? And what does that matter? And for me, the biggest reward has actually been by helping other people along the journey. And a few years ago, I launched a program in Australia for an organisation that look after kids with cerebral palsy. And I spoke for 5 minutes, and in my talk, I just said how great this organisation is. And I have mild cerebral palsy, but I haven't had to use their services, but I know how important they are. And when I finished, this mother came up to me. I'm sure she was my age now, 37, holding a little hand of a 3-year-old boy. And she came up to me and she was crying. And I thought, what's happened? This has been a really happy occasion. And she came up to me with tears rolling down her face and she said to me, Katrina, it is so fantastic to meet someone who has the same disability as my son. She said, I've never met somebody with mild CP. And she said, you don't know how much time I have spent worrying in her own thoughts about what's going to happen to him when he gets to a teenager. Will he fit in? Will people like him? Will he be able to achieve his best? But she said, now I've met somebody who has exactly the same thing, and that you've done that, I now feel rest assured that he'll be able to do the same. And you know what? I've got goosebumps. It's not cold, it's because that is so meaningful. And at the end of the day, we do what we do for our own meaning and for our own value and for everyone else around us. But I think the true meaning as well is how we're helping others along our journey. And I know you guys do some fabulous stuff for charities around Nepal. I'd love to hear some of your other CSR strategies and what you're doing. I know you support Child Reach. You're on the board of Child Reach, aren't you? Which is amazing, which I'm here to do a whole bunch of stuff with this week. But I'm going to finish now, but there's a whole bunch of stuff for you to reflect on. And even if you could just take one thing away, even if you could help me with a vision of getting 3 more Paralympians in Nepal, that would be pretty extraordinary. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions, or we can eat and chat. And so thank you very much. Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Let's have a quick question round. If you guys have any, then we'll close the session, followed by lunch. Who's up?
So for the past 10 years, you've just been doing this. So
Yeah.
you left
Yeah.
after Athens.
Yeah, so I finished in Athens. So I'm getting eaten by ants now. But my last competition was in 2006, and then I got married, and in that period of time I've had 3 sons. I never have actually officially retired because apparently women can be better athletes after they've had children. I kind of joked about it saying childbirth to a 400 metres. Has anyone ever run a 400 metres? You probably remember at school. Yeah, well, no, but when you run a 400 metres, at least you know where the finish is. When you're giving birth to a child, it is one of the hardest things, or the hardest thing I've ever done. But women just become stronger athletes, so I thought, oh, maybe I'll come back. But when you become a mother, you become very selfless. When you're an athlete, you're very selfish. And I soon realised that I've been to 3 games, I've won 3 gold, 3 silver and bronze, I've done what I wanted to achieve. So yeah, I'm a physio by trade. I still work as a physio a small amount of the time, just so I don't lose that registration, in case I ever have to be one. But I have my own business, and I have so for 14 years, and travel around and do a whole bunch of stuff in Australia and internationally, and sit on quite a few boards and do a range of stuff. But and yeah, went back to London in 2012 as an ambassador for the International Paralympic Committee. So it was the first games where I didn't have to compete. There was 3 of us, and it was fantastic because I could eat what I like, drink what I like, stay out late, schmooze with I got to spend the whole day with the CEO of Allianz, who is, he has 200,000 employees, which was pretty amazing just to hang out with him from a business perspective. The night before, I sort of Googled him, how much does he earn? It was interesting to see. I think his base wage was about 10 million euros, just as his base wage, which is a pretty good income. But our female CEO of Westpac Bank, she's just resigned this week in Adelaide. She was on 12.8, which is a pretty nice salary. But and I got to spend the whole day with Prince Albert and Princess Charlene of Monaco. You might know them, or if you know any royalty. So the Paralympic movement continues to open some extraordinary doors for me.
So what does your company do?
Yeah, what I do, so I do a lot of workshops. I do 1 day, 2 day, 3 day training programs. I do a lot of facilitating development, mainly with corporates. Yeah, I'll still always go back and do stuff in schools, because I think that's a great place to work with kids who are still struggling or trying to work out where they fit, and to share this story as they're going through it. Hopefully could be helpful. Yeah.
Can you share something about your work-life balance?
Yes.
Work and life balance.
Yes.
Your personal life
Yeah.
and work.
How do I balance it all? Yeah, exactly that way. Yeah. So I've got my priorities. I know where I can. I know where I want to spend my time. I know how much time I've got, and then I just balance it out. Yeah. It's not a perfect scenario. My husband travels a lot as well, so we often just one goes in, one goes out. And I think one of the best ways to work out is if you know what your red flags are, and when I say what are your red flags, do you know what happens to you when you start to break down or get sick? Who knows what one of their red flags would be if they're burning the candle at both ends and pushing themselves too hard? Do you know what it is? So,
You start getting
Anxiety.
yeah, or I sneeze. So my red flags are I'll start sneezing, I get headaches, and I actually start to limp a lot more because I'm actually just physically and mentally tired. So maybe have a bit of think of what some of your flags could be. When you just know that if you push it a bit more, you're going to end up sick. And as athletes, we were so good at knowing what our red flags were, because we could never be sick. Our bodies were our performance vehicle. The hardest thing is to stay healthy as an athlete. It's so difficult. So I'm really attuned to my body and know where's my limits. I think that's one of the first things you've got to know with work-life balance. What is your limit? So life is busy. I go through periods where I might have 6 presentations in 1 week, and I work like crazy, and then the next 2 weeks I might not have anything. So I just have to put all things in place to make sure I can get through that period, and know how to make sure, I plan for it. So it's a constant balance. But if you stick to the process that I talked about, and putting work-life balance as one of your priorities, you'll start to put strategies into your life to make that happen. Yeah. I'm sure you're all hungry. Hey, let's eat, and let's just chat. I'm going to hang around till as long as I can, really. I don't want to leave this beautiful place, but and I always put up my email, but I've got cards here. If you ever want to email, or you're coming to Australia and you want a nice glass of wine with me, or if I can help in any way with anything in the future, or you come across some kids that you might want some advice with, I reckon I'm going to be connected for a while in terms of the stuff that I'm doing with Child Reach. It's probably an interesting story actually how I actually got here. Last year I was one of 100 leaders chosen from the Commonwealth to attend a leadership program, and we started in London. We did a 7-day leadership program, and then half of us went to Mumbai and the other half went to Johannesburg. And we were looking from a leadership perspective, not only at ourselves as leaders, but also how we could help others. And so what we came up with was that we had to we had a challenge to work out answers to. Then we had to go test that challenge in another culture, hence why I went to Mumbai. And Sharing Lama, who heads up Child Reach Nepal, his boss, Feroz, he was actually one of the other leaders with me in London. We met, and then when I went to Mumbai, I came across Sharing in Mumbai, and was telling me the fabulous stuff that he was doing here in Nepal. And I just said, I'll get there one day. And we're here. So it's amazing how everything's networked. So there you go. So thanks, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Katrina, for the lovely talk for us. Just to briefly update you, we got in touch with Katrina, I think, 3 weeks ago, and she was, happy enough to come and talk to us in one free day out of her 7 busy day in Nepal. And thank you for that, for coming over to our retreat and sharing some motivational and inspirational talks to all of us. Although we look a bit sunburned, a bit tired, instead, I think it was pretty motivating. I'm pretty sure everybody's going to pick a bit of whatever you had to share in their personal life or professional life. The other thing also about the EO chapter, which I should have shared at the beginning, this is one of the chapters in the world, out of 150 chapters, that has won the 5-year consecutive Rockstar title in EO globally. So this is the chapter that's always aiming for gold also in our organization, and that's something I wanted to share earlier. So at the end, I want to call to the President, Sanket, and give out a small token of appreciation from EU Nepal for coming down for one free day with us, sharing your one free day with us, and inspiring us with your talk. Thank you so much.
Before we break up for lunch, can we have a group photo also?
Yeah, sure. That's
Maybe
with
we
the
get
gold
a better
medals.
view of the river.
Yep.
Picture you should take here.
Yeah.